important. I
Yeah.
hope that priests hear this. Okay. I hope that the priests that are giving advice listen to us and at least hear where we're coming from. That we're not just a bunch of people that want to be condoned to sin. Like I think that's the attitude. You just want us to let you sin. No, these are people with real struggles, real situations, trying to do the right things, and then sometimes they. Welcome back, everyone. Craig here. No Jonah. Jonah and I put in our work this morning. We were here at 5:30 a.m. recording, and he's off playing with his family, and I'm still here grinding away. Have a guest today. You won't see his beautiful face, but you'll hear his lovely voice, the Catholic adventurer. And he and I think we found each other on Twitter, and he has
Yes.
his own show. And we've been talking about doing a show for a while, and mostly my crazy schedule prevented it. And so he finally took the bait, and here he is. So, with that in mind, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Give us any information you can or want to about who you are, and then we'll start talking.
Well, first, thank you for having me. This has been a long time coming. I go by the handle Catholic Adventurer. You can find me on X at For the Queen BVM, or follow my podcast feed on X at Cath Experience. And I'm Catholic Experience everywhere else. And that's also the name of my podcast, The Catholic Experience. And yeah, I think we found each other on X. I think you followed me, and then I followed you, and then it was funny because I jokingly said, and I think this because I had heard of your show before.
I'm
And
sorry.
yeah, well, it's kind of funny because it was in my head, and I thought, well, they must be good because they're in my head. But then after watching your show, I'm thinking, oh, maybe they're in my head because I've heard negative things about their show.
I always wonder what gets chatted about because I'd really love to know. I'm sure it's.
Yeah, I don't even remember. But just jokingly, I said I posted to X and I said, yeah, so I just followed these guys. Am I going to regret it? Is there anything I should know? And I just said that jokingly. And then I went and reviewed your show, and I was like, oh, oh, because you said, well, it depends on who you ask,
Yeah.
because blah 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 blah. And I says, wait a minute, but we're still following. We're still following each other.
I'll be the first to say we're not everyone's flavor of tea. So
Yeah.
we already are, and I'm glad that you and I have been able to sort of keep in touch and banter, and sometimes
Yeah.
disagree a little bit.
Yeah.
So continue on.
Well, I was just going to say, I think your show it may not be my flavor of tea exactly, but I think it's a flavor of tea that needs to be out there. Catholic broadcasting, first of all, traditional Catholic broadcasting is extraordinarily boring. And you can say, oh, it's good catechesis and this and that. Okay,
Yeah.
but it's boring. Then you have Catholic podcasting, video or audio. Most of that is boring, but it generally is a little bit more edgy. Okay, it's better than traditional Catholic broadcasting. But it really is mostly the same flavor of thing. It's here's what the faith teaches. Here's what the church teaches. Here's church history. Here's how you can be a better Catholic, yada, 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 yada. And even I do it from a different direction, but I do a little of that. And even I know that well runs dry after a while, you know. And even if you say, well, there's 2,000 years of stuff that we can convey to an audience, but the audience doesn't have 2,000 years of capacity to receive it. So eventually you're going to run dry. And I do think there needs to be more Catholic podcasting, broadcasting that really, really shatters the mold and really meets people on the ground, not in the clouds. I think we need more of that. I think your show does that very well. It meets persons on the ground. So there's that. It may not be my particular flavor, but I think it's a flavor that needs to be out there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and I can confirm from sort of the audience and the following that we have, and the messages that we get, that there is certainly a not insignificant group of people that resonate with the type of things that we talk about and struggle with or whatever. And I know that when I started this show, I kind of went in search of it, and I really couldn't find anything. And like you said, sort of the traditional, I call it the polite Catholic media. That's how I separate everyone
Mm-hmm.
from us. Um, it's helpful to a degree, but what I found personally is that um, when I found that my own personal life and the struggles that I had, let's say, didn't meet up to that, I felt like there was something wrong with me, and there probably is. But I just thought there's this just seems so unachievable to me at times that I went sort of on a quest to either one figure out why is my experience seemingly so different from the this, or we should be warning people
Yeah.
about it, because I think the stuff that I talk about, the stuff we talk about is very real, and it's very acute for those of us that struggle with these things, that either you're going to have to wrestle with and figure out a way through, and that's all we do. We just try to be kind of the transparent voice of
Mm-hmm.
what what life is actually like, and it's always hard to know where how far do you push it before you, let's say, become imprudent about it. And I hope you will be in a position to talk to us a little bit about that, because I think you've pushed back at times. I'm going to say far more polite and gently than the others that have called in and tried to get our show taken off the air and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. Well, I try to recognize the good in everything, and that's an achievement, because if you had known me, say 20 years ago, that's not the person you would have met.
Hmm.
I try to recognize the good in everything. We spoke before, I don't know, maybe a month ago on the phone, and I told you this is I was reviewing your shows, and a couple of them I got all the way through, and then a couple of them just not because I was creeped out by them,
Hmm.
but just for time, in the interest of time, I only did 5-10 minutes here and there, a few others, and there were always parts that made me go, ugh,
Hmm.
no,
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
feeling that one,
Yeah.
you know. But there were also parts that I recognized as being really, really solid.
Hmm.
Like the way I put it to you over the phone was like I named I said a line or I quoted a line that you had said, and I said that line may be why that entire episode exists.
Hmm.
I do try to recognize the good in something, and I really I think Catholics need to get the hell over it and have that same attitude, because let me tell you, if I can do it, anybody can. It's a hard attitude to achieve. If I can do it, anybody can. Recognize the good in something, and be patient with what might be beneath your personal standard or beneath the standard of truth. I just recently discovered there's someone who he's a Catholic revert, very, very nice guy, good guy, faithful guy. I would never have guessed that only until recently he did not know the Holy Eucharist was the real presence of Jesus.
Hmm.
You would never, ever have known that. How that could have
Yeah.
slipped by him, I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, let's say he continued to believe that. Well, the church teaches it's the real presence, but I don't think so. Okay, but I try to recognize everything else that's good about him, and I'm patient with maybe where he falls short. Now, that's not falling short of preference. That's falling short of a truth, a core doctrine. You know, okay, we try to get it to where it needs to be. If it's something that needs to be moved, if it's something based on our preferences, well, just listen. If someone hands you a plate of food and you like half of what's on there and you don't like the rest of it, you're not going to throw the rest of it away. You're not even going to throw the whole plate away. You're just going to eat it and tolerate it, be patient with it, and appreciate what's good about it. And we really need to do that with others.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that really is something, unfortunately, that is missing in the Catholic social content creation. Is I think I made a joke
Yeah.
about this on Twitter the other day, that it seems like Catholic Twitter is just everyone telling other Catholics they're not Catholic enough, and I know a lot of it. You get on Twitter. I guess I still call it Twitter, but is that's not necessarily real life, and I think some of it is just people just bored and doing stuff. But
Yeah.
it's very easy to focus on the 1% or 10% of disagreement and totally lose the ability to find common ground.
Well, I
Yeah.
think I think people find power in disagreement. And, you can't, I mean, the question is out there is whether or not a person has any power or authority at all, but they all think that they do. And even I do, I'm sure, on some level, right? You can't leverage that or exercise power and authority when you're agreeing with people. You can only break that sword out. No jokes, please. You can only break that sword out, when you're disagreeing with someone,
Yeah. Yeah.
I got to watch everything I say with you. Remember, I dropped a comment to you yesterday, I think, and I said, long story, and we may touch upon this in this interview, but I said something like, the nature of the ball is its baldness.
Yeah.
And then I put in parentheses, no jokes, please, because I can already see one coming.
Yeah. Well, you know me well. Jonah and I
Yeah.
seldom miss an opportunity to be juvenile.
Yeah, a little
Um,
bit.
yeah, no, I think that is true, but you know, I don't know. I feel like this type of conversation is the kind of the midway point between, let's say the conventional polite Catholic media and let's say the conversations that maybe we have kind of with our friends and stuff, because that's really how Jonah and I started this podcast. Is
Mm,
we started having conversations out deer hunting and stuff like that's like
yeah.
stuff that we had never really talked about anywhere else. It's not something I'm going to go put on Facebook, and we found such common ground, and we're like, well, that's exactly my experience, and no one ever talks about this. And so we really are trying to bring out those real conversations out into a place where people can talk about a little more, and understandably so, not everyone is excited about that, and I think
Hmm.
maybe you have some of those
Yeah.
trepidations, and
Trepidation is a good word.
I don't know what the I don't know what the right I don't know what the right balance is, and because but I do feel that the the sense that I get from people that feel very, let's say, black and white about things is, if you have questions or concerns or anything like that, keep them to yourself or take them to your bishop and your priest and all that, and certainly don't go out and broadcast it and all that. And I'm not insensitive to that, but I also think that that is just it does two things. One, it doesn't change anything.
Hmm.
Number two, it isolates people because everyone wanders around thinking I'm the only one that has a struggle, when there is in fact a community of us
Well,
that
that's a
share
good
these
point.
things, right?
That's a good
Um,
point.
and number three, it's just how do we help people? How do we? I just and I think it gives a false impression that everything is just hunky dory. You go to pre-Cana, you learn NFP, you learn theology of the body, and you're on this romantic love affair that Christopher West talks about. That I think for most of us is not how our experience actually is, and you can become very
Disenchanted
disillusioned.
or
Yeah,
disillusioned. Yeah.
yeah.
I think the important thing is, I mean, for me, when when some of your ex posts pop up, or when I was reviewing and watching some of your shows, my first thought was, I see why this needs to be talked about. But I go back to like the 70s and 80s. Okay, so in the 70s and 80s, in cinema and on TV, everyone was talking about sex, 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 sex. It's like the word was dropped gratuitously. What do you like? Let's say different strokes. What are you doing, Kimberly? Oh, I'm just thinking about a boy I met on the way home from school. And maybe somebody's like, you mean sex?
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah,
why?
yeah.
So they were dropping it, dropping it, dropping it gratuitously. TNA was all over 80s cinema, again, gratuitously. There was no context to it. It was just there, whip them out, and there they are, just for no reason at all. And I feel like we crossed a barrier somewhere between the 60s and 70s where we said, you know what? Sex isn't sacred. Sex is a free for all. It's a party. It's a game. And we need to just relax about it. We crossed that barrier somewhere between the 60s and 70s. In the 70s and 80s, we took that baton, the culture did, and they were talking about sex everywhere. even on primetime TV, okay, that families are watching, sex, 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 sex. Now it's matured. It's now it's you don't see TNA so much in movies, but you see the sexualization of children, not in the sexual act, but exploiting their sexuality. You see it on Disney. You hear it in songs. I cannot believe some of the things I hear in modern secular music. So these things have matured. And I think when we put something out there, when we put something out there flippantly, it does sort of take it from its pedestal, I guess, and it brings it down to the ground. Or another way of seeing that is it puts it on the floor or it throws it in the gutter. Is there a middle ground between making something a little closer to reach, a little closer to address, without leaving it on the floor, without leaving it on the ground? I think there is that middle ground. In your case, in the case of your show, I don't know what that middle ground is, but my perception has been consistently that I think this is a little too much. Like recently you did a post on X asking people, when you're engaged in like the marital act, when you're having sex with your wife, let's just be blunt, or with your spouse, do you wear your scapular? And I'm like, no, why do you even have to ask that? Like, that's so unnecessary. It's an interesting question, but it's so unnecessary. Why do you even have to go? I'm not asking you. That was just my reaction. I do think there's a middle ground between letting something remain unreachable and making something a little too common or frivolous, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I don't disagree with any of that, and I actually thought the scapular one was better than some of the stuff that I ask about, but it's actually gotten a
I would
lot of
agree.
it's gotten a lot of response. I don't know. I just see here's what I see happening. I think for many, many years, and I think this is where the church, I think, kind of got flat-footed in its resistance to modernism and stuff like that. Is it, up until let's say the 1950s, um, the church's approach was sex is about procreation. Don't like that is the reason. Don't glamorize it. Don't try and do all these other things because then you're gonna de-emphasize the pleasure and other enjoyment for it. It's sort of more or less sense that it tolerated sex
Mm-hmm.
far more than it promoted it, and it was sort of like because the church and especially some of the ancients, the Augustine and Aquinas and those guys, I think for a long time had a very uncomfortable relationship with sex, and there's questions about did Adam and Eve even have sex before the fall? Like that's kind of how
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable I think Catholic history has been with it, and it's something that was tolerated, and kind of the way that we tolerate it because we know people are going to do it and want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
They say, well, as long as it's around procreation, you're bringing new saints into the world. We'll allow you to do it, and it sort of controls the consumption a little bit, I think. And so that was sort of the overarching thing, and then people just didn't talk about it. Like you didn't talk about anything further than that. And then sort of the 50s and 60s and 70s happened, and then Humani Vitae and Theology Body came out, sort of. And then I sort of put Christopher West out there as the face of that, where they kind of took it, I think, in a different direction, I think too far, where they really tried to liturgicize. I don't know if that's the right word, but really
Mm-hmm.
talk about the sacredness of the act and how it mimics the Trinity and this where this divine communion with God, and it's like almost recreation of the Mass, and they're making all these connections. Which, okay, I don't really want to be thinking about the Mass when I'm doing that. I don't want to be thinking about that when I'm in Mass, right?
Yeah.
But I think that was sort of their way to recognize.
I think that's a good way that you put it. They try to, liturgize. I don't know what the word
Yeah,
is either, but
that's
it,
a
it,
better
it
word.
is kind of liturgizing the sexual act, isn't it?
I think so, and I think it was their
Which is
effort.
which is really unsexy.
Well, I think so, and I think that's further removed from reality than just making babies. I think for most of us,
Mm-hmm.
and and so I think that was an effort to again recognize that people whether we like it or not, sex is something that we think about a lot, especially men. It's a hopefully a very normal part of our relationships, and it's something that people want. And it seems like the theology of the body and all that is an effort to again paint it more so than something tolerated for procreation, but as something that's good or whatever, and which is I think is noble. But again, I think it sets people up for failure because I know from watching podcasts around it that people get so scrupulous. They're like, I just don't have quite the pious disposition going into the marital act. I'm too much looking forward to the pleasure that I feel like I'm sinning and I can't perform. And so I think it sets up another problem that I think is trying to paint sex in a way that I don't think is quite the way that it's necessarily supposed to be. I'm not saying that isn't part of it, but I think it emphasizes it the wrong way. I think I think without making it too casual, it's a very regular part of our thoughts and lives and whatever. And how do we deal with that in a way that doesn't trivialize it, but
Yeah.
also doesn't make it so fraught with pitfalls that you know we're all just paranoid to engage in it. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the I think the unmined territory here, the uncharted territory, if you
Yeah.
will,
I
that
th-
we are really trying to go into.
I think the first thing, as I'm listening to you talk about this, and I think you're spot on most of it, if not all of it. My first reaction is like, guys and gals, you need to relax. You are not that important. Well, the sexual act is like a liturgy and the Trinity.
Yeah,
Relax.
yeah,
You are not that damn important.
yeah.
St. Irenaeus, I think it was St. Irenaeus, said, the glory of God is man fully alive.
Mhm.
A couple of things to point out there. He did not say mankind. It wasn't a general thing. He said the glory of God is man fully alive, the individual person, not just men, males, but
Yeah,
man,
yeah.
individual persons fully alive. And the height and perfection of the physical expression of our sexuality is man being fully alive. Well, but I enjoy it. That's you being fully alive. Well, but I prefer this and I prefer that, as long as it's not creepy or literally perverted. That's you being fully alive. You're I guess effectuating your human sexuality, which came from God. You don't have to make it make it a liturgy
Yeah,
in the bedroom. You
yeah,
really don't.
yeah.
Okay, so the enjoyment of it, the expression of your sexuality, however that manifests during the act, as long as it's not like crazy. Like, I like to beat the hell out of my wife. Like, guys, come on now, as long as it's not crazy. However it manifests, as long as it's not crazy or objectively sinful, you're golden. Just relax.
Mhm,
Just relax. The
mhm,
sexual act is unitive and procreative. The glory of God is man fully alive. Just don't get stupid.
mhm,
You follow those, you're fine. You're
mhm.
fine. Wherever your disposition needs to be, God will bring it there. Just stay within the lanes. And it's a pretty simple lane to follow. You don't need to break it down to, at the granular level. Am I doing this right? Am I doing that right? I don't know where this comes from, but it's all over the culture, particularly in the church, where we feel like if we don't have our hands on the steering wheel, we're going to crash.
Mhm.
Okay. We're going to crash into a school bus, kill 100 children, kill yada, yada, yada. Guys, we are not that important. And damn, we are not that powerful. You really have to relax. I think theology of the body, which I love, it does set a standard. It does set the heights of the standard, or at least it gives voice to the heights of the standard. But it is not necessarily a rule book. It's not, for instance, you take any piece of brilliant theology, moral theology from Saint Alphonsus Liguori. Okay, well, that's you. If you try to treat that as an instruction manual or a rule book, you're going to go crazy.
Mhm.
If you look at it as a guidebook, You'll be okay. This is the height. This is where I want to be. I have absolutely no power to get myself there. So I'm going to try the best I can to do everything that I can. I'm going to be patient with my shortcomings because God is. And am I more important than God? If God is patient with my shortcomings, I'll be patient with my shortcomings. But please, God, make me better. And just relax.
Yeah.
I think theology of the body can be looked at wrongly as an instruction manual when it really we should be looking at it as the ideal. We should be looking at it as the truth, and we should recognize our own incapacity to achieve any truth on our own without the help of God, and that requires cooperation. And part of cooperation is submission, not activity, but submission, and letting God do. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I think I agree with really pretty much all of that. I think that I think theology of the body, if it turns out, let's say, in history to be kind of a transition, or a pivot from what we had to something better, I think I think it is really really great. But I think I see too many people viewing it as, well, this is the standard, this is the rule book, this is the new end of the road, so to speak. And I have I have as many troubles with some of the conclusions that people are reaching from theology of the body as I did under the old standard. In fact, I think the old standard was just much pragmatically easier to figure out. I'll just
Mm-hmm.
have babies or don't, where in one of the things that I have talked about, and I should put up I'll put up the little disclaimer here. This is more so for anything I say, not anything you say.
Oh no,
I
no. I just to be clear, for those who maybe are just listening to this in the background, the
Yeah.
disclaimer is: do not take theological advice
Mhm.
advice from us. Well, and I think that's important because I'm not a theologian either. I've spent a long time studying this stuff, questioning and questioning theologians and stuff. So, and I tell people all the time, and I even make the disclaimer, like if I'm saying something that's just me, I
Yeah.
make very clear this is informed by Catholic teaching, but do not take what I'm about to say as Catholic teaching. This is my thought. I think it's a good disclaimer, even for me, because you said, yeah, it's true for us, maybe not for you. No, 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 it's true for me too. Don't take theological advice from me.
Well, I know that the stuff that we wander into is maybe a little more questionable sometimes. But here's where my main struggle comes from, and
I,
I
I
hope
just
you.
I just have to say it's so hilarious that you have that disclaimer on cue, like you have it loaded up and ready to
Oh yeah,
trigger.
I have a whole list.
Oh, do you?
Here's the next one. Go to
Go to
confession.
confession.
In
Yes,
doubt, go to
exactly.
confession. Those are constantly scrolling on our episodes now.
Oh, I like this other one you just queued. It says, "Listen to the Catholic Experience podcast." That's a good one. Thanks
Yes,
for
man, I
queuing
could
that
put
up
it in
there.
there.
No, 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 no. It's okay.
So here's where I really have wrestled with, and I want to get your feedback on it, and maybe your feedback is you're a heretic, Craig. Shut up, but so be it. I'm gonna throw it out there as a speculative theology exercise. I I am very much in tune or receptive to the idea that we treat theology of the body or whatever as sort of this ideal, like as not as a rule book but as a guidebook, and as something that if you could achieve this, you are going to have, let's say, the highest functioning or very high functioning marital relationship, marital vocation, and will allow you to use
Ooh, I don't know about that.
the sexual relationship
Hmm.
to assist you in your path towards perfection. Okay, that is sort of the best, the better. And what I struggle to understand, and why I keep doing these damn videos, is what I don't understand is why one step short of the ideal isn't just less than the ideal, isn't just imperfect, but I think the word you said is objectively sinful. Like there is this huge drop off between what we are called to do and not called to do. And if you fall short intentionally or knowingly or whatever, that it's such a grave deviance from it that your very salvation is in jeopardy. It's a mortal sin. That is the part of this this puzzle that I fully confess I don't understand. I'm
Mhm.
not saying anyone's wrong, but I'm just being very transparent about my thought process. I don't understand how we got to the point that if you engage in the conjugal act this way, it's good. If you take this part or you wait too many minutes for this part, it's I'm telling you, this is all real stuff I've heard.
I know.
You are
I
now
know.
you are now committing a mortal sin. Like that part of it is really, really difficult for me to understand, and I don't
Yeah.
know what to do with it. It unsettles me in a lot of ways, and that probably comes through in some of the stuff. But that
Yeah.
that's the part where I would really, really like someone that is willing to come up and do more than just recite sections of the theology of the body or catechism or whatever, but actually dig in and say, let me walk you through this, Craig. Let me explain what you're missing here. And I so far I don't think I found a person that can do that.
Okay, I'll make my best effort.
Okay.
So I approach this from we had this little exchange yesterday about truth versus reality. So
Hmm.
I approach this from the perspective of truth, and everything that proceeds from it is true until it stops being good. Until it stops being good. Let me explain. So I don't think it's healthy or helpful. First of all, let me lay this foundation. Okay, to achieve the ideal put forward in theology of the body, I don't think that by itself is going to perfect a marriage. In fact, it could actually damage a marriage. Theology of the body, putting that in action, okay, making it a reality between two spouses should be part of a whole. It should be part of a whole progression toward holiness. And it should be something that draws us to it rather than something we are chasing after. It should be something that we are responding to out of desire rather than reacting to out of anxiety. So, while theology of the body says, I mustn't do this or I shouldn't do that, and so I won't. Well, there's something to be said for that. But at the same time, as I say, it should be part of a whole progression toward holiness, the individual spouses and the couple, because the couple really is a person. It's like another person, the couple, right? And so what you do behind closed doors, as we say, what you do behind closed doors shouldn't be the altar of your relationship. I don't know if that's contrary to what is said by, experts in theology of the body, but this is just me saying it. What happens in the bedroom should not be the altar. In other words, what progresses in the relationship shouldn't start in the bedroom. What happens in the bedroom should reflect what's going on throughout the relationship. Okay. I think the sexual act can become Tylenol, right? It conceals pain that we are experiencing in the relationship. It can also become, I guess, the party that celebrates everything that's good that's going on in our relationship. We shouldn't look at theology of the body as something we do in a vacuum. We achieve or seek in a vacuum. It really should be part of a whole. If your whole relationship is not ordered toward holiness, that doesn't mean it's perfect. It means it's on the road. If your whole relationship is not ordered toward holiness, is not progressing, even in baby steps, toward holiness, I got to tell you, you could follow theology of the body to a T, and it's not going to do a damn thing for you. In fact, it might actually harm your relationship. Okay, so it has to be part of a whole. That's number one. That's probably the main thing I want to say because I can't remember the other thing I wanted to respond
Hmm.
to. Oh, the perspective of truth. So, should we do this? Should we not do that? How many minutes have passed between X and Y
Hmm.
and Z? I think you have to start from the perspective of truth. Am I abusing my spouse? Am I taking advantage of my spouse? Am I expressing sincere love for my spouse? Um, Or, as I said, am I taking advantage of my spouse? Is this a selfish act for me, or am I sharing an experience with my spouse? I really think it has to start there. I think there needs to be some recognition. Look, sometimes we don't realize that what we're doing is selfish and self-serving. And men in particular are selfish and self-serving by our nature. Sometimes we don't realize that we're doing it. So we need to have in mind that a particular thing, I don't know what to call out, like as an example, but I mean, how blunt can I be on your show?
I don't think you can be any more blunt than we have been. So
Okay,
say it in
so
clear terms. You're not going to offend me or anyone that watches.
and plus it's not live, so you can always edit it out.
Yep.
So let me skip that story. That one's too personal. But
let me get your phone number and social security number before you say it,
yeah.
go on.
Don't let me forget. So if we're talking about, for instance, oral sex, well, is this self-serving? Well, yeah. Is it possible that this can be a sharing of an experience between the spouses? I guess so. Yes. In fact, I would say, I haven't thought much about this, but I would say yes, that can be the sharing of an experience. But is it discordant with the nature of the sexual faculty, both spiritually and physically? Well, that answer is absolutely yes. It's absolutely discordant with the nature of the sexual faculty, physically and spiritually. Does that mean I'm going to hell? Probably not. It probably doesn't mean you're going to hell, but you've brought discordance into yourself, into your spouse, into your relationship, and into the sexual act. You've brought discordance there, and it's like putting a teaspoon of sugar in your gas tank. Is that going to take you off the road? I don't know, maybe not, but you're going to get real shit gas mileage. Put 2 teaspoons, a tablespoon, a couple of cups of sugar in your gas tank. Well, now you're off the road. Okay, but it starts with that 1 teaspoon. You see, so when you bring discordance in, is it going to damn you to hell? I mean, really, only God knows. Okay, he knows your will, your intent, and your capacity and facility for understanding for understanding your actions. Only God knows that. So will oral sex send you to hell? I have to say my gut reaction is probably no, but it does bring discordance into the whole climate between the spouses. And that discordance can lead to other acts or other attitudes. It can lead to progressions that could put your soul in great jeopardy. The single act itself, I don't know, probably not. But it does bring something dangerous into the climate between the spouses.
And when you say this discordance, what's your basis for that? Because I just my own personal experience, if I wasn't infused with someone telling me this or that, I wouldn't necessarily see it as being discordant. If the couple enjoys it and wants to do it, I look at it and I'm like, well, it looks like our bodies are designed to satisfy each other in a diverse set of ways, depending on our circumstances and things like that. It looks like there are, in some ways, there's a genius behind it, that there's multiple opportunities and ways to do things, as opposed to this is the way and that's it. How do you bridge the gap, saying, well, this is objectively discordant, other than, well, this is what some philosopher hundreds of years ago said?
Man is very inventive. Okay, it's a superpower. It's something that we have over the whole of nature. We're very inventive, and we can find 1,000 ways to do wrong things with something that's good. Okay, now by wrong I mean either incorrect or immoral. I'll leave it to anyone to decide, because I'm just putting forward theory. Okay, we can find 1,000 ways to do a wrong thing or a bad thing or an incorrect thing with something that is good and well composed, well configured. Right. So, does a man's nipples have nerve endings? Yes. Why the hell? Why do we even have nipples? I have no idea. For that matter, I don't even know why roaches exist. So I have no idea. Or, again, I don't want to be creepy, but nipples in general, okay, have nerve endings. Well, you would think the nature of the female breasts, right? What are they for? Apart from, they're obviously attractive, okay, but they also have a function, right? Breastfeeding. You would think it would be smarter not to put nerve endings there. Wouldn't that be more clever? Hang on, I have to send this note to heaven. God, next time around.
Yeah, Human 2.0.
Right. But can can we turn that into something pleasurable, right? Where nerves are and how anywhere nerves are and how nerves can be stimulated. Can we turn that into something pleasurable? Yes. Is pleasurable both physical and can it also be spiritual? Yes. Can the spiritual level of the pleasure bring spouses closer together? I mean, I have to say yes. It would be stupid to say no. But is there a point at which that can be wrong, bad, incorrect? Again, I would have to say yes, because now, is certain touching objectively wrong? Probably. I mean, people are going to crucify me for this, but I have to say probably no. Is oral sex objectively wrong? From the perspective of truth, I would have to say yes. Is it going to damn you into hell? No, but well, probably no. But is it objectively wrong? Yes. How can we know? Here's my answer to that. How can we know? What's the nature of the mouth? To speak, to eat, um, sometimes to receive affection. You know, it's something weird about the mouth. We always want to engage the mouth in something that recruits our affection, which is probably why we eat the Eucharist, right? You see a cute kid, you want to, right? You want to kiss your pets. You want to, we kiss sometimes to revere, right? To you kiss a statue or you kiss something that you love. Oh, I love my new thing, whatever. So that's the nature of the mouth. What's the nature of the genitals? We don't have to enumerate that. I can if you like to, but I think we all know the nature of the genitals between the sexes. The nature of the mouth and the nature of the genitals do not coincide. They aren't complementary. Can they be made? Can they be used together? Well, obviously, people have been doing that. So obviously, they can be. Can sensation be used to heighten the experience of the sexual act? Yes. Well, what if that means taking a belt to the behind of my spouse? And I mean really walloping my spouse. Well, now, does anybody see a problem with that? If you're causing harm to your spouse, well, what if the spouse wants it? Well, if the spouse wants you to amputate your spouse's arm, let's say it's a man. If your wife wants you to amputate her arm, right, and this kind of thing brings her pleasure, would that be a good thing? Would anyone argue that that's a good thing? There's a point at which a good thing can be bent to the point of breaking. You understand? I understand that there's the pleasure moment, the pleasure between spouses, the giving and the receiving between spouses. But I do believe that when natures conflict, the nature of the mouth, the nature of the genitals, the nature of a man's genitals and the nature of an anus, when natures conflict, even if we don't see it immediately, okay, when natures conflict, harm happens. The harm may be spiritual. The harm may be physical. But if it's when there's spiritual harm, there's always physical harm. It just doesn't always happen immediately. Or there may be spiritual harm that doesn't manifest physically in the conjugal act, but it manifests physically elsewhere in a person's lifestyle. I don't know where. There's a million different ways that can manifest. Does that make sense?
Um, yes and no. I mean,
Okay.
I get what you're saying. I follow the logic of what you're saying, but I would say intellectually it doesn't. It's not sensible to me.
Okay.
Um, so few thoughts or reactions or questions. So this this thing about the mouth conflicts with the genitals. Like again, I don't see that as being obvious. I think that to me, the idea that it conflicts seems very much based on, let's say, ancient sort of views about the body. And there was a time in our ancient history when there was heresies that saw the body as evil and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
It seems,
Mm-hmm.
and you get some neurotic people in there. I mean, I I don't know that it's that obvious that the mouth is not designed or acceptable for the genitals, sort of for the reason you said. Is it? I mean,
Well, but listen, your mouth is on your head at the top of your body. Your genitals are in the middle of your body. So right away, the orientation of the body tells you those two things were not meant to go together, right?
Says who? Like, you lay next to each other and you fix
That's
that. It's a
natural.
body
That
orientation
you
thing.
if you lay next to each other, your genitals are together, not your mouth and your genitals, or not your
180
mouth.
degrees. 180 degrees. You can fix
But
all that.
okay, so what you're saying is by changing the natural orientation, you can force two natures to coincide. But by doing that, you're changing a natural orientation, which means it is not natural.
I don't know whether there is a natural orientation. Like, where does that come from? I
Come on,
mean,
man.
there's no there's no user manual with this. It's us figuring this stuff out. And
Listen, us standing up or us laying down, there's a natural orientation.
it's natural to lay down when I sleep, and it's natural to stand up when I podcast. I don't know. I mean,
Listen,
I
you do know, you're just resisting. When you're standing up, your head is at the top, your waist is in the middle. If you flip around, now your head is at the bottom and your waist is still at the middle. Okay, you're not facing your spouse's genitals by flipping around. You have to contort yourself or yourselves to make those two things connect, right?
natural body structure was one thing. You've really lost me at natural orientation. Like, that to me, that just but anyway, okay, let me give you that for a second. Okay. So I am even okay with the notion that there is an order to things or a disorder to things. Okay. I am fine with the idea that our bodies are oriented towards the male genitals being inside the female genitals. I'm not. I'm not. I don't have a problem with that, from the sense of, is that an ordered way or is that the best way to use them? Where I struggle to understand is, okay, when we start talking about something as disordered, how do we make the giant leap from, not only is this disordered, it's an evil. Like, this is morally evil. That, I think, is the part of it that you know is not clear from nature. Like, I don't think an honest person, Thomas Aquinas, whoever, would say, I can look at nature, I can look at the anatomy of a man and woman, and I can see how they're supposed to go together. And I don't think anyone can conclude, other than recourse to some religious, scriptural, whatever, and conclude that if you misuse that order, it is a gravely sinful matter akin to any other mortal sin, whether it's killing someone, having an affair with your neighbor's wife, whatever. Like, that is the leap that I think just casually gets, oh yeah, that makes sense. That naturally follows. I don't
Mm-hmm.
see how that naturally follows. Can you help me understand
Well,
that better?
I personally, I don't want to get into, for myself, I don't want to talk about what is or isn't gravely sinful, because we can know that an act is of grave matter. The sinful matter is grave. Well, we can know that from scripture, from Revelation, and so on. Whether or not it's mortal really falls to God, because only he sees the will, only he knows the heart, only he can comprehend your understanding. And I don't want to make people more neurotic by focusing on this is mortal. I mean, we can talk about what's mortal in terms of, the gravity of the sinful matter,
Yeah, let's
right?
talk about grave. So let's just the issue of whether it's grave matter. Why is it a grave matter? Setting aside knowledge and consent,
Mhm.
why is it clearly grave matter to, let's say, use the sexual organs in a disordered way, if we agree to those terms?
Okay, so again, let me start with a foundation. So the expression, everything has a nature. A pencil, a phone, the genitals, a fingernail. Everything has a nature. Okay, and every nature is ordered toward its natural expression or natural end. Okay, so you use a butter knife to turn a screw. We're using the word screw, and I'm about to say, no jokes, please. You use
I'm
a butter knife to
slow
turn
this
this.
morning. I'm
So,
sorry.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, can that butter knife turn that screw? Well, yes, but it can also slip and cut your hand, right? Why? Because that is not its nature. It does not possess the nature of a screwdriver, okay? And so it's going to fail in that use of that tool. Okay, so everything has a nature, and every nature is ordered toward its natural end. Okay, a pencil makes a mark. It can also erase the marks that it makes. Okay, now everything in the body has a nature, and the parts and systems of the body have a collective nature. Okay, so the sexual faculty of the body is a constitution of parts, right? And I would say that the soul, the spirit, the mind, the emotion, that's the thing that's really, I don't want to say dangerous, but precarious about human sexuality. Is it's the only thing about the human person that encompasses the whole of the person, our bodies, our minds, our emotions, our fears, our hopes, our desires, sexual or otherwise, right? So the sexuality is extremely powerful. It's probably the most powerful force on the earth, and I'm being literal. Human sexuality, well, maybe second to human will. Human sexuality is at least the second most powerful force on the earth, perhaps in all of creation. Yes, more powerful than even the sun or a star. Okay? Now, with something that powerful, with something that has the capacity to bring two persons together, not just two bodies, but two persons together, it's the capacity to create new life, and not just new animals, new human beings, right? Pretty powerful. Also, human sexuality doesn't begin and end at sex. Okay, I think I made this point to you once over Twitter, that sex and sexuality are distinct, but they're united. Okay, we can human sexuality, for instance, and I'm going to scandalize a lot of people, but to give you this example, when Mary was washing the feet of Jesus, right, and she's drying his feet with her hair, that was an expression of sexuality. It had nothing to do with sex. It had zero to do with romance. It had zero to do with any physical attraction. I am not saying any of that came to bear. What I am saying is that was an expression of sexuality. Okay? Please, folks, do not take from this that I am suggesting that they were engaged romantically, physically, that there was any romantic tension between them. Nothing. I'm not saying any of that. Nothing. Get it out of your head that sexuality means sex. Get it out of your head. If you're so interested in being, a good and faithful Catholic, then hear what I'm telling you. Sexuality and sex are distinct. They're not one and the same. Okay? If you're so interested in orthodoxy, then take what I'm telling you. Sex and sexuality are distinct, and they can be discussed separately. Now, having said that, and yes, that is traditional. Now, having said that,
there's only room for one heretic on this show, so don't be invading my space.
Exactly. So that having been said, so there are natures, and natures are ordered toward their ends, and then we have the power of human sexuality. It is not just the sexual act. Now, the sexual act is the height of the expression of human sexuality, right? So that's where human sexuality achieves a natural end, not its exclusive natural end, but probably its perfected natural end, right? Because in every way that the sexuality expresses itself, in cuddling, in hand-holding, in gazing into someone's eyes, in tenderness from one person to another, it doesn't even have to be romantic. Human tenderness is an expression of human sexuality, even though it has nothing to do with sex or romance. Now, all of these little ways that human sexuality expresses itself, it comes together and is expressed in total at its height, maximum power, all 8 cylinders in the human sexual act. Okay? Now imagine misusing that power. Imagine misusing that power to an extent that we literally redirect or deprive it of the natural expression of itself. Well, why is that grave matter? The simple answer I'm going to give you is, I kind of don't know. Because if you ask me as a thinker, I would say, that's messed up. That's not nice. That's rude. But clearly it's more severe than that. Clearly it's more severe than that, because the church teaches that it is grave matter. Grave matter. So I will say this, human sexuality is a spiritual power that expresses itself in the physical order, but it's a spiritual power. So the damage that is done when it's misused or misapplied is primarily and most substantially a spiritual damage, a damage that we cannot see, but a damage we cannot escape, whether or not we can identify it. It also shows itself in the physical order, right? For instance, what's the big deal if everybody's just having sex with everybody? Well, here's one big deal that manifests itself in the physical order. Before the 40s, there were two venereal diseases, syphilis and gonorrhea. Then you can count a few other spin-offs, right? What is that called? Not spin-off. It's not spin-offs. I'm just using that word flippantly. Variants. Okay, but basically it was syphilis and gonorrhea, and they were both treatable. Yes, there was herpes. Herpes goes back a long way, but it really wasn't considered a sexually transmitted infection. It could be transmitted in sex, but it was so uncommon, right, that it wasn't even viewed that way. You could get herpes, touching something that someone else infected with herpes touched, right? Now we have the 50s and the 60s. What did we get from the 50s and 60s? We got condoms. Now people were having sex without consequence. What did we get in the 60s and 70s? Well, more into the 70s. We got the pill. We got abortion. With each of these advancements, people were engaging in premarital sex more and more and more and more. And this is secular studies. This is not conjecture. This isn't even a Catholic study. This is secular data. So in the 50s to 60s, the number of people having, let's just call it free sex, jumped a lot. 60s, 70s, and 80s, with the introduction of the pill and abortion, again, with each of those, there was another bump. Okay, before the 1950s, 4% of people were having premarital sex. Into the 70s and 80s, 78 to 80% of people were having premarital sex. Now, what do you have? You have over 100 sexually transmitted diseases. Some of them are curable. Some of them are not. Some of them will kill you. HIV and AIDS hit the scene in the 80s. Probably one of the most disastrous things, right? That's probably the clearest example of what happens when sexuality is misused and misapplied. But it only demonstrates the whole, because, as I said, we went from 2 sexually transmitted infections to now well over 100. Well over 100. Many of them incurable. Some of them will kill you. Some of them will permanently damage you. So when we have this upset of a spiritual power, a tremendous spiritual power that's upset or misused, damage happens. First, it happens spiritually. So you can say the disordering of sexual desire is one manifestation of how that damage happened spiritually, right? But it also causes damage physically or in the temporal order, sometimes in ways that we don't see immediately, sometimes in ways that we see so far into the distance that unless we're really looking closely into it, we fail to connect that the cause led to that effect because so much time has passed. Why is it grave matter? I don't know, but I know that it is. And therefore, I try to respect that, I try to respect that because I know that I'm causing harm, at least spiritually, and that harm has echoes or resonance in the temporal order, in the physical order, in the lived experience of man.
So a lot there.
I'm sorry.
Well, no, I appreciate that, and it sort of reinforces kind of how I come about this. Is that a couple things. Number one is the slippery slope is a large part of what I'm hearing there, and I hear it a lot. Is you give people an inch, they'll take a mile, and I'm not insensitive to that. To give you an example, the church teaches that contraception is evil. Um, I I accept that teaching from a intellectual standpoint, although I don't think that teaching is without grounds for scrutiny. But I've never used birth control. I'm never going to use birth control, so that it doesn't necessarily impact me beyond an intellectual level. But I can see how, on a practical level, contraception could be a hazard to the marriage because it 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 essentially makes sex available on demand, or at least in theory. In as much as I get up and I whine and complain about natural family planning and abstinence, it does. I've said this and I'll say it again. Having a shortage, if you will, of the availability of conjugal act is beneficial.
Hmm.
And for most of us, it kind of creates that shortage, so to speak, that we need, I think, in our lives. Whereas if we were just purely had to be self disciplined with use of contraception, I think most of us, myself included, probably don't have the maturity and discipline to manage that in such a way that we don't become resentful for our spouse. We're like, well, what's your reason for saying no today? Was you know, so I see in that teaching, I see real world personal implications to that, negative implications to the marriage that seems to correspond to the teaching. And in terms of this premarital stuff, I mean, again, there's commandments. Like we have the 10 commandments. We have the thing, we know that fornication is wrong. We know that adultery is wrong, all that kind of stuff. So there's a clear standard there. And as you say, I see a very clear and predictable real world natural consequence of those actions that sort of reinforces the spiritual. See,
Hmm.
not only is there spiritual harm, it will cause these other natural harms to you in your marriage or your relationship. Where I and the problem is a couple of things. First of all, if we treated all of sexuality as a it could be sinful, it could be dangerous, it can lead to the slippery slope, and we treat it similar to how we do eating or drinking alcohol. They're not intrinsically disordered. Obviously we have to eat. A lot of people don't drink alcohol at all because it's just they just can't control themselves. And for a lot of people it may be sinful to consume alcohol because they're predisposed to being to abusing it.
Mm.
That is sort of circumstantial. It's not intrinsically evil to
True.
use alcohol or whatever,
True.
but it
True.
could very easily become sinful, and we can recognize situations where it becomes sinful. We don't do that with human sexuality. We say it is intrinsically evil, and there's very few things, surprisingly enough, that are intrinsically evil. Not even killing another human being is intrinsically evil because there are circumstances where it
Right.
be morally
Self
licit.
defense. Right.
If yeah, it may be meritorious to kill another human being. So it's circumstantial based. Yet when it comes to sexuality and specifically let's say disorders or deviations from the conjugal act, we don't say, well, here's the hazards. If you start engaging in this act, it could lead to these problems or whatever. We say you can't do it at all. You cannot, you know, let's say engage in coitus interruptus, for example. That that I struggle with because I don't understand why we treat that to this intrinsically evil standard where we can't even have a conversation about the circumstances. And the other thing is this: it would seem that there would be clear and obvious negative consequences in nature if these things are in fact spiritually wrong. And I'll say this very clearly. I think there are very clear and predictable harms that can happen to a marriage if you actually follow these rules. For some couples, that it may require them to be completely abstinent for months or years at a time. That is damaging and harmful to the marriage. Now, maybe that's warranted, but it is clearly causing harm to that marriage in an effort to follow these rules. Whereas, if they engage in these imperfect acts, it's helping the marriage. And why that is intrinsically disordered can never be done under any circumstances. The method behind that, I really, I just cannot understand.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say is this, and I wrote this note down. Yeah, I lost it. But you know, so that is to me, it's. I think it's one thing. I don't think it's all that helpful to talk about the venereal diseases and all that stuff that can happen when you do obviously stupid stuff. You're sleeping around, having an affairs, and all that kind of stuff. Like I get that. But when you're talking about a couple that's lovingly married. They are not using birth control. They're open to children, but you reach a point in your life where you just can't get pregnant, and why it is that why they just must live as brother and sister, because we're not comparing, let's say, a disordered act to the perfect act, which is not what they're going to do. We're
Mm-hmm.
comparing this quote unquote disordered act to nothing, to pure abstinence, which that I think is where I think that gets lost in translation. Is we're like, yeah, is let's say pure oral sex without any intercourse, is that disordered relative to the conjugal act? Yes, but we're not comparing a couple doing that to the conjugal act. They're not choosing that over the conjugal act. They're choosing that over abstinence. And so that their area, in my opinion, is where there are a lot of couples, I put myself in that boat, that are trying to do the right thing, trying to be open to life. I have 9 children. We've never used birth control, but I tell you, that is where life gets really, really, really hard, and the suffering that we endure, trying to maintain, no sexual activity during that time. Maybe I'm just a weakling, but I tell you, it is so intense that I would love to better understand why we have to be brother and sister in that time, as opposed to, let's say, using some imperfect act to assist our marriage, do those kinds of things, even when we are in a position where we can risk getting
Well,
pregnant.
I think every life and every marriage has to endure some kind of suffering. Sometimes it's momentary, sometimes it's systemic, right? Um, Boy, I could tell you some stories, not personal to me and my marriage, but personal to my life, like people I've known, people I've been related to who are in really bad situations. And it's just a fact of life that sometimes we have to endure a suffering that is unfair or unjust, or just, boy, this is really bad circumstances. I know someone whose wife contracted HIV. I don't remember if she had cheated on him. I don't remember how she contracted HIV. I don't know if they're still married today, but I know they had been for years after she contracted HIV. Okay. And this was around the time that people started surviving HIV. Okay. So
Mhm.
they were married for years. Maybe they still are. Well, what does a person what does that couple do? Right? Should they be permitted to use contraceptive? I sure hope not, because people can still contract HIV even when using a condom. But that's another story. But should they be permitted or given a dispensation? I don't know. Should they live as brother and sister? I mean, that would be ideal. But is it realistic? That I don't know, because I'm not them. Should they be permitted to express their sexual desires and attractions to each other in some other ways? I don't know. That's really something they have to take up with their priest. But I bring it up. That's one example of a few I could probably call out, where someone is in just a really bad situation, and what does a person do? Is there a way out of the suffering in these situations? Is the way out patience until the suffering comes to an end? Like if someone's doing NFP, right? And there's a period of time, as you said, there's a period of time where you have to be chaste. Well, that suffering comes to an end. So the way out, I guess, is patience, right? Sometimes people may not have a way out. Like, as I said, that person that I mentioned whose wife contracted HIV. Um, they have no way out. So what do they have to do? Just endure the suffering? Or do they have momentary ways out, engaging in some kind of sexual expression some other way? I really don't know. But here's what I do know. Sometimes life happens, and sometimes it goes real, real, real foul. And you want to shake your fist at God and say, why would you let this happen to me, to us, right? Well, hell, I wish I had an answer to that. But sometimes life happens, and it requires that we suffer either permanently until we get to heaven, or temporarily. Sometimes there are ways to mitigate the suffering, and sometimes you're subjected to it, to all of it. I don't know what the answer is. I think, practically speaking, I would say a person has to talk to their priest. And if you have to priest shop because, priest X and Y and Z are idiots, maybe you have to go to priest A or priest B. But fine. And also a priest may have some authority to dispense you from certain obligations. Take that with a grain of salt, because priests have very little authority to dispense you from certain things, but they don't have zero. They don't have zero authority. And they also have some wisdom and some knowledge of things that you may not have been aware of. So definitely talk to a priest. That's number one. Communicate with your spouse. Obviously, that's number two. But also understand this: suffering is just a reality, and it's a painful and illogical reality, but it's just the reality. And sometimes we have to endure it short term. Sometimes we can mitigate it. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes we have to take the full brunt of it for the rest of our lives. And unfortunately, it's just the way it is. I think when we get to a place where we accept that, it harms us less, right? One time I was cooking and I was turning some mushrooms in a frying pan with my bare hand, and the frying pan was very hot. My son saw that and he says, "Daddy, how can you do that? It's so hot. Doesn't it hurt?" I says, "Well, I feel the pain, but I don't care that it hurts." You see, sometimes it's mental. This is what I said to him. Sometimes what we do with pain is a choice, and sometimes it's not, right? If you set me on fire, I can't choose to not care about that pain. Sometimes pain is a choice. Sometimes suffering, what we do with suffering changes the character of the suffering too. You understand? So I think when we accept that this suffering is the way it is, and I'm going to suffer it the best way I can, then maybe we focus our conscious efforts not on woe is me, which is very tempting, believe me. The woe is me is very tempting. But if we focus our conscious efforts not on the woe is me, but on other things that we can enjoy all the time, on other things that we can find delight in, find peace in, have fun with, right? The suffering at the front of the store may give deeper meaning and significance to the joys that we experience at the back of the store. And that sounds like sexual innuendo, but I don't mean it that way.
We got to get you on the show more often.
I know. I'm giving you lots of material here. I can't wait to see your post feeds on X. I can't wait to see what happens. I'm giving you tons of material.
All right. So here, and I don't disagree with necessarily any of that, except this. So I am not here saying that people shouldn't suffer or that there isn't merit in suffering, and I'm not even saying that people shouldn't, let's say, follow all that and endure that suffering. Like there probably is virtue in that, and that probably the person that follows all that is probably closer to a saint than people that, let's say, cut corners, so to speak. The problem, as I see it, is that it's one thing to differentiate between saint and sinner, so to speak, or saint and the average person. Most of us, I hope, are just kind of the average people. We're not saints, but we're hopefully in a state of grace and all that. The problem is that the scenario you paint to me sounds like the standard for someone that wants to be heroically virtuous, and it's something that I would not discourage anyone from trying to follow. The problem is that the standard you set, I think, requires heroic virtue that most people can't follow, or if they try to follow, it's gonna result in other negative things in their spiritual life or otherwise. And that this if you fall short of that, you are now in not only you're not a saint, you are in grave sin, or at least potential grave sin, that you've cut yourself off from God. So that is this huge drop off between what I think is a heroically virtuous situation and it's there's no middle ground. It's either you are a virtuous saint, like someone going through that. I can't imagine you are a saint if you can do that. If you can't, you're potentially going to hell. Like there seems to be some middle ground in there that is missing, at least in my mind, is missing.
Hmm.
Here's the other thing. Um, it's one thing, yes, suffering is part of life, and I think JD makes this point is yes, but some suffering is clearly avoidable. Um, I know people that suffer from chronic headaches, and it doesn't matter what they do, they are always going to have headaches, and their life is miserable because of it. If I have a headache, I could take that headache away if I take some Tylenol. The fact that some people have headaches that can't go away, and there's a Tylenol right there, that I need to not take the Tylenol and endure the headache because, well, suffering is part of life. Yeah, it is. That doesn't mean that all suffering shouldn't be avoided. Like that to me is a real dangerous thing when we start to justify suffering because suffering can be part of the human condition. Yes, that does not mean that we can just flippantly say, well, sorry, life is suffering. Yeah, you're going through some bad times.
Yeah.
You can't do this. And here's the final thing I want to say. Getting back to the whole natural ends of our bodies, etc. I think of the person that has HIV, or let's say, God forbid, your spouse is paralyzed and they cannot perform sexually anymore. That is a horrible thing. That is something that you can't control. There's really no way to fix that.
Right.
But to me, in some ways, that points to the genius of God saying, guess what? If circumstances happen that your normal process doesn't work, I gave you a mouth. Like how do we not look at that and say, yeah, I mean, to me, that seems like at least a natural question to ask is you can, and so that to me is where I keep coming back to. And again, I'm sure I sound like a broken record and I just need to suck it up, but I don't know. I think these are
Well,
valid questions that
I
I
think
don't think there's a great answer for yet.
I think if these questions or difficulties are in your head, then they're real and not crazy, and you're not the only person. That's the first thing I would say. I think it's very funny, the idea of God saying, "Hey, I know you're crippled, but good
Yeah,
news, I gave you a mouth."
yeah.
I got
Maybe
some.
I'm a heretic, but to me, I see the positive in things as opposed to the negative. But
I mean, I would really, really strongly advise people to talk to a priest, because here's what I'm about to say,
yeah.
and I have to be very careful as I say this. Sometimes we find ourselves in situations and we deal with it a certain way that isn't ideal, right? But it isn't necessarily the end of the world.
Mhm.
What is the level of sinfulness? What is the level of culpability? Is this not objectively, but intrinsically wrong? And or is this at all justifiable given my situation? So let's say this person that I said, his wife contracted HIV. Is it justifiable for that person, for that man, to have a sexual relationship with someone else and a marital relationship only with his wife? Now wow, hell to the no,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Is it
Agreed.
justifiable for them to express their sexuality with each other in some other way? Is it justifiable? I have to say, I don't know. And that's not to say I don't think so. And
Yeah.
it's not to say I don't think it is.
Yeah.
What I recognize is there is a real problem. There is a real intent to achieve the good,
Mhm.
right? Sexual expression between the spouses. There is a real and sincere attempt to achieve the good. And I think such a person or a couple in a situation like that, where they're faced with this puzzle that they can't solve, but they want so very desperately to solve it, but they're missing pieces. I would say go to a priest, and that priest will help you achieve the pieces. And what you hear from that priest may surprise you. And in certain contexts, what you hear from the priest will be the voice with the authority of the church behind it,
Mhm.
not just the priest's opinion.
Yeah.
Sometimes priests give a bad opinion. I mean, I've heard priests
Mhm.
give people and couples direction that a radical traditionalist would say heresy, heresy, heresy. But the truth of the matter is, he has the authority to say what he said precisely the way he said it, and what he said carries the authority of the church. I want to have a theologian on my show at some point to talk about this, and he's probably going to grill me for even dropping this, but it's called Interior Forum. I'll give you an example. A woman is divorced from her husband for, let's say, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now she wants to get an annulment. The husband is dead. All the witnesses are dead, whatever. She literally cannot get an annulment. You look at the circumstances of her marriage, you would say, assuming she's giving you all of the facts, right? Everybody, everyone has their version of the story. Okay, but let's assume everything she's saying is true and factual. And you look at these facts and you say, yeah, if a tribunal heard that, they would definitely grant you an annulment. Mm-hmm. But now it can't happen because everybody's dead. A priest might have the authority to say, in the eyes of God, you are annulled. Now, as a thinker, right, as a thinker, I would say, the way God expresses that voice is through the church. But he can't express that voice through the church because the agency necessary for that mechanism to function is not there. The spouse is dead. The witnesses are dead. The priest might have the authority to say, in the eyes of God, you are annulled. He might have that authority. And he might say, you're allowed to have communion even though you're remarried. He might have that authority. So I would say, go see a priest. Another thing I want to say is this heroic virtue thing that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. I'm a big proponent of heroic virtue, but I really want to, I really want to put this forward for everybody. We shouldn't think of heroic virtue as being extraordinary, even though in a fallen world it is. We have to think of heroic virtue as normal, right? So my wife is, let's say, handicapped, right? And can't perform sexually. Mm-hmm. And now I'm stuck. Well, it's heroic virtue if you suffer through that. No, I would call that normal. I would call it difficult, right? I would call it a trial, but I would call that normal. It's just a person doing the right thing. Then there are some things that are heroic virtue that I would say on any scale would be called heroic, just look at any of this. I think permitting yourself to be subjected to martyrdom is heroic virtue, for instance. But I would say a lot of what we today think of as heroic virtue, we really should start thinking of it as just normal, because heroic virtue really is a person being who God created. It's a person, when God thought us up, each of us individually, right? That was who he thought up. So whenever we do something that's heroically virtuous, I always say, I don't talk a lot about my past in the Marine Corps, but there are people who know my past, say, thank you for your heroism, thank you for your service. And I always reject it because I don't think I was a hero for doing what I signed up to do. Mm-hmm. That's my subjective opinion of it. You were a hero for, let's just say, a firefighter. You're a hero for running. I think that's heroic, but personally, just me personally, my opinion, I would not call him a hero because that's what he signed up to do. Now, if you go into a burning building that's collapsing, it's collapsing, you go in there to rescue somebody, that's heroic because that is extraordinary. That's not what you signed up for. You signed up knowing that could happen, but that's not the ordinary in and out of, fighting a fire, somebody's garage is on fire or something. We have to think of heroic virtue as being normal. We have to think of basic virtues as being normal, not heroic. They're normal. We can and should strive to achieve them. That's all I'll say about that.
No, that's a good point, and I think that's well put. I think what I would say is this: when I say it's heroic, I don't think there's anything heroic about going without sex. It's certainly difficult for us, but where I think it becomes heroic is if you can go without sex indefinitely, and you can go without any kind of other acts with your spouse, and as we know from the church 2352, and you can go without masturbating, which reality is that's what's going to happen to most guys under those circumstances. That is intrinsically disordered, so you can't do that. And if you can manage to do all that and not turn
Right,
into a
right,
complete
right. I get
crab
you.
around your family and your family. My like when we were struggling in our intimate lives, our kids noticed. Our home life was worse. In fact, one of our kids said, "Man, you guys are so much happier now." And we had fixed some things in our relationship, but
Mm,
like my job is to get my kids to heaven, right? Like in getting back to what you said, the fully functioning human, the fully functioning man has this part of his life in order. Okay. It is disordered for a man to live as cousins with his wife. I'm not saying it can't happen or shouldn't happen, but you are creating a situation that's going to have ripple effects not only on him but on your children and all this and that.
mm.
So anyone that can go without sex and never, let's say, violate 2352, I don't know if that guy exists, and also be the model gentleman for his children, to me that's heroic. The
Yeah,
problem
I would
the
agree.
problem yeah, the problem I think is that, and just to be very blunt and clear about it, any guy that has to go a long time without sex is probably going to masturbate from time to time, and that's not good for the marriage either. It's not good for him. And so that here's what I want to say in getting back to what you said. You are absolutely right that priests have an important function here, and I've talked to many of them and I've gotten mixed results,
Hmm.
and I've seen marriages rise and fall on which priest they ended up talking to. So the role of priest here is very important. I
Yeah.
hope that priests hear this. Okay. I hope that the priests that are giving advice listen to us and at least hear where we're coming from, that we're not just a bunch of people that want to be condoned to sin. Like I think that's the attitude. You just want us to let you sin. No, these are people with real struggles, real situations, trying to do the right things. And then sometimes, like you said, you have kind of an imperfect situation. And if you find yourself unable to follow that heroic level, something gives somewhere. And where should it be? I don't know. But we need priests
Uh,
to be educated and to give advice, and it's not that easy. Like that's why we have this show. It's not just simple to go up. I mean, most of us don't want to walk to a priest and say, let me tell you what's going on in our sexual lives. This is the sin I'm doing because of this and that.
yeah.
That's easier said than done, but it needs to happen.
Yeah. There are also Catholic marriage counselors, people who are they're psychologists. They're very well educated. They're good counselors, and they're Catholic, like it's their charism. So they do what they do from the perspective of theology. So you don't always have to talk to a priest. Depending on where you are.
They're
But
hard to come by too, though. I can tell you that it's
yeah,
not easy
yeah.
finding someone.
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
Increasingly, though, I wouldn't trust this, but increasingly, some of them are doing sessions over secured video links. Like something more secure than even
Mhm.
Zoom.
Yeah.
So there's always that option if they're too far away from you. I would say this though: we all have to realize that we are fallen creatures trying to be like God. That really is what this is all about. We're fallen creatures trying to be like God, and that is so damn hard to do. So we have to take the journey seriously without taking ourselves too seriously.
Mhm.
Okay? Because and I say this and I say this, the sainthood is in the trying, not the achieving. This is what I say all the time.
Mhm.
It is impossible to achieve sainthood. All we can do is try our hardest, and God does the rest. We cannot achieve it. Okay. So we have to be patient with our shortcomings and our failures, always try our best, even if we fail again and again and again and again and again and again into infinity until we
Mhm.
die. We have to keep trying our best.
Yeah.
We have to keep trying our best. And, a practical way I think of it too is minimizing damage at all costs. People say, you were in the Marines, so you learned how to kill people. But that is not
Yeah.
the objective of a Marine. The objective
Right.
of a Marine is to achieve whatever the objective is.
Right.
And if people get in your way, you avoid them. If you can't avoid them, then you kill them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
people have this idea of
Yeah.
anyone in an infantry.
Yeah.
Well, you're trained to kill. We're trained to achieve the objective, right? Killing is really the last resort.
Mhm.
Okay. And that kind of has to be, I approach it similarly in the quest for holiness, is try to minimize the damage at all costs. And sometimes that means we have to, for instance, I'm very good at this and it took a lot of practice. If I'm in a bad mood, I completely compartmentalize it and I shut down. Okay. And I interact with my family minimally until I'm in a better mood, because I know everything will trigger me. I'm going to yell. And sometimes I fail. Sometimes I do anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. But mostly I'm pretty good at taking that suffering onto myself and just dealing with it until that ember goes out. Okay. Sometimes minimizing the damage does involve taking the suffering onto yourself exclusively and just dealing with it until it goes away. So anyway, I don't want to overtalk it, but sometimes you have to think of it that way, that you have to try and try and try. And it's paradoxical, but holiness is in the trying, and the trying involves failing. I'm not saying willfully fail. I am not saying be happy that you fail. What I'm saying is failure is a stone in the road. If you're walking the road, you're going to encounter those rocks. Okay. It is the way. It is not a distraction unless you surrender to it. It is not a distraction. It is the way. So take the journey seriously, damn seriously, but don't take yourselves too seriously, because then you're making yourself to be God. Amen. You know, so try your damnedest, man. Try your damnedest. Be patient with yourself. Go to confession. I don't give a shit. Pardon my English. I don't give a shit if you have to go every day, every week. Go to confession. Get back on the horse and try again, and just be at peace with yourself. That's it. Kind of an anticlimactic end.
Well, I really enjoy this, and judging from the comments, I know those that are here really enjoy this too. Like this is the kind of, I think, conversation that we've been searching for. You've been a very wonderful guest.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. You've been a great host.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope we can do it again, because I think this is helpful. I think this will resonate with people, and I want to reiterate that anything we say here, if we don't do it, we do anything we say, do your best, go to confession, trust in God's mercy. Don't lose hope. Like that is really, I think, something that can happen.
Oh God, don't lose hope.
Don't lose hope. And that, to me, for a long time, I had lost hope in this fight, which is why I kind of went out on this journey. And now I have hope. I'm not perfect, but I have hope, in this community helps give me hope too.
Yeah.
So I have a few minutes left, and I have to go back to my job and provide for my kids. So I want to give us a chance to wrap up here.
Okay.
If people, and I'll put it in the description below, but why don't you give us a little shout out for what you're doing, where people can follow you, that kind of stuff, and then we'll wrap up here.
Yeah, I have to say, my podcast is kind of catechetical, but really what I try to do is I try to teach people how to know the truth, so that they can live the truth, so that they can become the truth, how to think like Catholics, how to be, as best as I can share, how to be who God created when he thought you up. It is not boring. It may not be to people's likings, but I can guarantee you it's not boring.
Yeah.
My podcast is called The Catholic Experience. The Catholic Experience. My website is catholicadventurer.com, which is very confusing. The website is the name of the host, and the podcast is something else. But I really hope you give it a listen and share it with your friends, because I'm on a mission to make saints. I am not a saint. I'm trying damn hard. I am not a saint, but I'm going to tell you my hope and dream and my suspicion. Here's my suspicion, is that I'm going to help God and the church to make saints, an army of them, who are infinitely more holy than I can ever hope to be. And that would make me so happy. My dream, and this is not me being poetic, man. I like to think that when I make it to heaven, my first word to Jesus is going to start with an apology, right? And I know I did this, but I'm so sorry that I was doing this,
yeah.
and I almost envision Jesus saying, hey, look at all of those souls.
Mhm.
Some are in heaven, some are still on
Yeah.
earth. You see all of those saints?
Yeah.
And he's going to say, do you know you helped me make those? And I don't care if I'm never known for it, if the church never recognizes me, if nobody ever remembers me, but just the idea that I helped God, I did in some teeny tiny way, I helped God in the church to make even one saint, whether they're canonized or not, even one saint, man, that's the joy of my life. Obviously, the first saints I have to make are my kids, but that one's obvious, right? I'm talking about beyond that,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And that's really what I'm on a mission to do, to help God and the church to form saints, superheroes of the church and of the human order. That is my mission. And I do that by helping you to know the truth so that you can live the truth, so that you can become the truth. The Catholic Experience, please check me out. You can also find the show on X at Cath Experience, and I think I'm on Facebook at Catholic Adventurer, and I think I'm on TikTok at Catholic Experience. I know it's confusing. That's why God made a rewind button. It's also why he made a mouth.
One of the many uses for it.
Many uses.
I'll link to all that below. It's been a pleasure. I hope we can do it again. I feel that this was a very good and productive conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. You know, one of the things I enjoyed about it too is I understand you better because,
Yeah.
you know, trying to understand you
Yeah.
over socials, it's like,
Yeah.
I don't get it. But I understand you better now, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for the opportunity. It was a lovely conversation. Thank you for having me.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you guys in the
Sure.
chat. Thank you everyone for
Thanks,
listening.
everybody.
And until next time, everyone, have a good one.
God bless you all. Bye bye.